Hello, Tony, your deck architect here, back on my channel once more with another deck profile. With Dimension Force coverage already in the horizon and a Ghost from the Past themed deck profile saved for later, today I want to use this time to profile an update to one of the lesser known archetypes of the Albaz saga. Rising from the sands of the Golden Sea once more, reforged with support from both Albaz Strike and Dimension Force. Today, we're going to be taking a look at the Springans. So the last time I covered the Springans, it was back when they had first come out in Blazing Vortex. At that time, I demonstrated the deck's core concept of easy Xyz plays, but left the profile concluding that the deck wasn't quite there yet, lacking just a few more pieces to be good. In the interim since, the Spriggans have been busy, with several waves of support since granting the deck a plethora of new tools to work with. But they wouldn't be fully ready until the Albaz Strike structure deck, when one last wave of support would grant the deck with a few Albaz cards with fantastic backwards compatibility to this deck. Putting it all together, the updated Spriggan deck performs much more fluidly, with a much better advantage engine and a lot more ways at getting to its optimal setup turn 1. Now with that being said, the deck actually had a lot more plays available to it before the May 2022 ban list. Prior to this ban list with Verte Anaconda, the deck could leverage a lot more of its interactions with the Albaz cards to produce some very cool hybrid boards. But with the banning of Anaconda, a lot of that has fallen through. Fortunately, Dimension Force was kind enough to provide the deck with a suitable replacement, so we're making do with that for now. But with that, I believe I've droned on long enough. Without a further ado, let's get into the deck profile. Springing right into things, we're actually going to start this deck profile a little differently today by introducing a spell first. Setting the stage for the rest of the deck, we have the centerpiece of the Spriggan strategy in our field spell, 3 Grade Sand Sea Gold Golgonda. Like many modern field spells, Gold Golgonda is packed with many powerful effects. While on the field, Gold Golgonda grants all your Spriggan Xyz monsters an additional 1000 attack points. Additionally, should one of your Xyz monsters leave the field by a card effect, you can target one monster your opponent controls and prevent it from attacking this turn. But most importantly, while you do not control a Spriggan's Xyz monster, Gold Golgonda can summon one directly from your X deck by discarding any Spriggan's card from your hand. For a field spell that isn't even part of the archetype, Gold Golgonda does a hell of a lot for the deck. Starting with that first static effect, granting an additional 1000 attack points to all your archetypal Xyz monsters is deceptively powerful, as it effectively boosts all your Xyz monsters an entire tier upwards in their stats. Under this effect, a Springans Xyz monster rocking sub 1500 stats becomes a monster capable of contending with a good chunk of today's boss monsters, a very crucial aspect when you take into account that all our Springans Xyz monsters are practically on that 1500 line. Moving on to that second trigger effect, the ability to freeze a monster whenever any of our Xyz monsters would leave the field by a card effect is rather nifty. Under the assumption that this removal is done by our opponent, this effect could potentially blank an attack that would kill us. But it's important to note that this effect triggers when our Xyz leave the field by either player's card effect, including our own. Meaning that if we have the means of removing our own Xyz from the field, we can also use this effect proactively to freeze our opponents at our leisure. But that's something we'll talk more about later. But concluding with that third ignition effect, this effect is the real meat and bones of this card and the deck. At the cost of just a Spriggan's card from your hand, you can cheat out any Spriggan's Xyz monster from your X deck. This function allows you to produce a 1-card Xyz play without even needing to commit a monster to your field. This kind of effect comes with shockingly very few limitations to what it can summon, meaning that we can even summon Spriggan's Xyz monsters from our X deck that we can't even practically summon. Likewise, this effect has very few restrictions on what you can do after its resolution as well, meaning that we're free to perform whatever plays we choose afterwards to supplement our board. The only known limitation to this effect is that you can only use it if you don't control a Spriggan's Xyz already. But with cards like Zeus and Lynx at our disposal, it's never quite hard to get rid of existing Spriggan's Xyz to make Gold Golgonda live at any time. With all that being said though, Gold Golgonda is only as good as what it can summon, and at the present moment we have 2 options to go off of. Diverting now to the X deck, we introduce our Springans Xyz monsters, of which we're playing 3 Spriggans Merrymaker and 2 Spriggans X-Blower. Both Xyz monsters have a shared quick effect, where on your opponent's main phase or battle phase, they can banish themselves until the turn's end phase. This effect allows your Xyz monsters to momentarily flicker out of the field, ensuring that your opponent cannot interact with them and that, come your turn, you will always have a monster to work with. Additionally, since this effect removes your own Xyz from your field, it also triggers your Golgoganda's second effect to freeze a monster, giving you some damage protection even as you leave yourself open with this flicker effect. Individually, however, each of the Spriggan's Xyz serve a different function. Starting with our Explorer, Explorer can target a zone in your opponent's main or back row and then detach materials from itself to destroy an equal number of cards in the zones at, above, below, left, or right of that zone. This is a pretty cool wave removal, as it potentially could destroy upwards of 5 cards in both back rows and monsters. Because it targets a zone and not a specific monster, the effect gets around monster targeting protection, and since you do not detach or destroy until the effect's resolution, your opponent has to respond to this effect without knowledge of what you would destroy, forcing them to act blind. Combined with Explorer's 1600 attack points going to 2600 under Golgoganda, Explorer is your main form of offense in this deck in clearing fields and dealing damage. Moving onwards to our Merrymaker, Merrymaker is to set up what our Explorer is to offense. When summoned from the X deck, Merrymaker can send any Springans monster from the deck to the graveyard. This effect triggers when Merrymaker is summoned by any means from the X deck, not just when it's Xyz summoned, meaning that it also triggers when Merrymaker is summoned off of your Golgoganda. And the ability to dump our Spriggans to the graveyard is crucial, as a number of our Spriggans monsters rock graveyard interaction abilities, with Merrymaker being an easy way to set them up from there. But that's not all. Merrymaker also has an additional bonus to its flicker effect. Should you flicker him out while he has 2 or more materials on it, Merrymaker can also send a fusion monster listing Fallen of Albaz as a material directly from your X deck to the graveyard. By doing this, we can trigger a variety of different end phase graveyard effects, the most prevalent of these being our Sprint, who can access Spriggan's monsters. But we can also send anything from Albion to Albalentis, all of which enable a variety of other cards. But specifically with Sprint, this means that through this effect, we will always have access to at least 2 monsters going into our turn, the Merrymaker returning and the monster summoned from Sprint. And that grants us superior field stability, allowing us to play great grind games against a variety of different matchups. Now it's at this point you may have noticed a slight issue with the deck. Both of our Spriggan's Xyz monsters require a lot of Xyz materials to function, and assuming that these monsters were summoned through Golgoganda's effect, they would be summoned with no materials on them. That's where our main deck Spriggans come in. Finally getting into the monsters, we have the return of the 4 original Spriggans from our last deck profile, consisting of 3 Spriggans Rocky, 1 Spriggans Pedor, 3 Spriggans Branga, and 1 Spriggans Captain Sargus. Each of the Spriggans monsters have a shared effect while in the hand, field, or graveyard that allows them to attach themselves to a Spriggans Xyz monster as an Xyz material. This is our primary means of loading up our Spriggans Xyz monsters with materials and can be done every one of our turns. This allows us to not only make use of the full extent of our Spriggans Xyz effects, but also allows us to constantly replenish our Spriggans Xyz with more materials even after they lost them through their own flicker effects. But that's not all. Each of the Spriggans also has a utility effect that supports the general playstyle as well. Rocky adds back any Spriggans monster or Golgoganda from the graveyard on summon, for a great recovery at any point in the game. Pedor tributes itself to summon any Spriggans from your graveyard, providing us a way to revive Captain Sargus to the field. Speaking of Captain Sargus, Sargus can detach a material from our Spriggans Xyz monsters on the opponent's turn to destroy a face-up card, and provides an additional 500 attack to your Spriggans Xyz while it is an Xyz material, acting as supplemental aggression for your deck. Finally, Branga can banish itself and a different Spriggans monster from the graveyard to search for any Spriggans card, allowing us to tutor for not only another Spriggans monster, but also our spell and trap support as well. But perhaps the best among the Spriggans is their newest addition to the archetype in the 3 Spriggans Brothers. Brothers, on top of possessing that shared attach ability, rocks an additional trigger effect where if sent to the graveyard from the hand or deck, can revive any Spriggans monster from your graveyard. Because this effect activates when sent from the hand or the deck, this effect synergizes with Gold Golgonda and Merrymaker to generate additional bodies through their send effect. This in turn provides the opportunity to produce more than just a single Xyz through these cards, sometimes allowing us to produce an additional extra deck play afterwards for more powerful turn 1s. From there, we then have the newest addition to our Spriggans lineup, straight from the Albaz Strike Structure deck in our 3 Spriggans kit. Now, if you've already watched my Albaz deck profile, you would already know how powerful Kit is as a searcher and an extender. But in the Spriggans deck, her purpose changes slightly. To reiterate what she does, Spriggan's Kit can be special summoned from the hand while you have an Albaz fusion on your field or in your graveyard. And when summoned, Spriggan's Kit can search for any branded spell or trap to then bottom a card from your hand afterwards. In a Spriggan's deck, Spriggan's Kit is the odd one out of the archetype. Having no attached effect, nor any direct interaction with your other Spriggans, Kit operates almost independently from the general Spriggan strategy. However, that doesn't mean she doesn't have synergy with the deck. Unlike your other Spriggans monsters, Spriggan's Kit is the only monster that can actually special summon herself to the field. Enabled by cards like Branded in High Spirits or Merrymaker's Flicker effect, Kit paired with another level 4 Spriggans as your normal summon provides you the means to hard make a Merrymaker. This singular use alone warrants her inclusion in the deck, as this benefit reduces our reliance on Gold Golgonda. As you may have noticed, none of our other Spriggans monsters have any personal extension, which means that without Gold Golgonda, they don't do anything in helping us make an Xyz. Worse off, with a majority of these other Spriggans heavily relying on a loaded graveyard, and our primary method of putting them into the graveyard being through Gold Golgonda's discard, it means that any hand where we see Spriggans but no Gold Golgonda is a hand of functionally dead cards. This is an inherent issue with a deck reliant on a field spell, and thus the ability to do anything beyond that field spell is very welcome, which makes Kit a valuable card in that front. But that's not all. Kit's ability to search for a branded spell or trap also has some uses. In most cases, you'll be using this effect to search for a Branded in High Spirits for a 1-card Xyz setup that I'll showcase later. But in longer games, Kit can also grab you a Branded Retribution to not only provide you an additional disruption, but also shuffle back sprints that you have sent throughout the game for further grind. Moving on to the non-Spriggans, we have a new addition to this deck straight from Dimension Force in 2 Therion Regulus. Therion Regulus can special summon himself from the hand by targeting and then equipping a machine in your graveyard. As all your Spriggans are machines who tend to want to be in the graveyard, this is not a hard summoning condition to meet. While on the field though, Therion Regulus can send a Therion from your hand or field to the graveyard to negate any effect. Now, since we aren't playing any other Therions, in most cases Regulus will be sending itself for its effect. But having actual generic negation is always welcome in the Spriggans deck, as it gives what is otherwise a toothless advantage engine actual bite to fight the opponent with. Funny enough, Regulus can also equip Spriggan from your graveyard, getting it out of the graveyard to eventually be put back in the graveyard to trigger its end phase effect a second time. Worst comes to worst, Regulus is also a level 8 monster that we can easily special summon, meaning that in certain board states he can also be used to produce an X-Flower for offense, and at 2800 attack, he at bare minimum is damage on board for OTKs if necessary. Lastly, wrapping up our monsters, we have 2 Effect Veiler as our hand trap of choice. Now, despite Gold Golgonda's importance in our deck, our reliance on it also creates a weird deck building restriction. Because Gold Golgonda requires you to discard specifically a Spriggans card to produce an Xyz, you want to reduce the amount of non-Spriggans cards that you are playing, as seeing hands of Gold Golgonda without a Spriggans is just as bad as the inverse. This means that we can't run a huge hand trap lineup, as that itself can be detrimental to our ability to play. Thus, we're only running the Veilers as our one hand trap in the deck. Proceeding to the spells, supplementing our 3 Gold Golgonda, we have 3 Spriggan's Watch. Spriggan's Watch, when activated, has 2 modes. Should you have activated this card whilst you do not control Gold Golgonda, Spriggan's Watch allows you to search for one from your deck. However, if you already control said Gold Golgonda, Spriggan's Watch can instead allow you to search for any Spriggans from your deck, and then send any Spriggans from your deck to the graveyard. Undeniably, Spriggan's Watch is a powerful card. At a basic level, it acts as a searcher for your Gold Golgonda, which is key given our deck's reliance on it. But if we already have the field spell, Springans Watch transforms into both a Rhoda and a Foolish Burial, providing setup in both hand and graveyard for all your plays. That means that regardless of where you are in the game, Springans Watch will always have use. Additionally, it's also relevant to note that Springans Watch is a Spriggan's card, which means that in those rare situations where it's dead, it can, at worst, be sent for Golganda to produce an Xyz, which, while desperate, may just be enough to get your plays going. From there, supplementing our Golganda further, we have another playset of searchers in 3 Spriggan's Booty. Spriggan's Booty is a treasure in many ways. Like Golganda, Booty also has a trigger effect that activates whenever our Xyz leaves the field by a card effect. This time, Spriggan's Booty allows us to target an opposing monster and prevent either player from activating the effects of the targeted monster for the turn. Unlike Golganda, this effect actually has disruptive impact, as locking out a monster from using its effects could stop a crucial play. Paired with any of our Spriggan's Xyz's flicker effects, this acts as a pseudo Veiler on every one of our opponent's turns. But more important to Booty is its second ability. By sending itself to the graveyard, Booty can activate a Golganda directly from your deck. Like Springans Watch, this is another way for you to grab into your Golganda, but this time it directly activates it from your deck to dodge things like Ash altogether. More relevant is the fact that it's another way to grab into your Golganda. This means that you're not only reliant on Watch to search into Golganda, and that in turn means that you are more likely to be able to use Watch for its second mode for greater setup instead. Furthermore, like Watch, Booty is also a Spriggan's card, which means that, like Watch, it can be sent in desperate situations for your Golganda to start your plays as well. Then, rounding off the spells, we have a ton of great consistency options, starting with 2 branded in High Spirit. In a Spriggan's focused deck, Branded in High Spirits allows us to reveal any Spriggan monster, to send a Spriggan to the graveyard, to then send that Spriggan to the graveyard, to then search for a Spriggan's kit. This not only enables the kit and the Spriggan, but also whatever Spriggans we want in the graveyard as well for maximum setup. Then we have 2 Pot of Desires, freshly semi-limited, for helping us see more cards. With over 9 ways into Golganda already in the deck, we really don't need to play a card like Prosperity anymore to dig for a specific one. Instead, we're opting to run Desires instead to see more cards for more plays. Finally, we have the 1 Terraforming as a 10th way to get into Golganda, ensuring that almost every hand we open will include a starter. Going into the traps, we have a few traps with 4 traps unique to this deck. Firstly, we have the 1 Spriggan's Blast. Blast, while we control a Spriggan's Xyz, can target a zone our opponent owns and either prevent its use if it's unoccupied, or negate the effects of the monster occupying that zone. This acts as both zone control and effect negation depending on the situation, to either force your opponent to play into zones where Explorer can hit bigger, or just negate things dynamically. From there, we have the 1 Spriggan's Interlude. Interlude can bounce a Spriggan's Xyz in response to any opponent's effect activation to either negate that effect or revive a level 8 monster from your graveyard. The first option is straight negation in a pinch. The second option, however, can revive guys like Regulus from your graveyard, functionally trading a weaker Spriggan's Xyz in for a more powerful monster that is also negate. Additionally, like Golganda and Spriggan's Booty, Interlude also has a trigger effect whenever our Xyz would leave the field by a card effect. This time, Interlude reduces the attack of all your opponent's monsters by 1000 for the turn. Because Interlude bounces your own Xyz for its first effect as part of its effect, Interlude itself can trigger its second effect without needing you to flicker, giving you negation and damage mitigation in one fell swoop. Then we have the 1 Branded Retribution. In Spriggan's, Branded Retribution can bounce 2 of your Albaz fusions in your graveyard to negate any effect that would summon a monster. Since you have cards like Merrymaker and Branded in High Spirits that can load up your graveyard very fast with Albaz fusions, it's very easy to have this effect live as early as your turn 1 to lock out your opponent's summons. And lastly, we have the 1 Barrage Blast. Barrage Blast is a continuous trap that allows you to detach any number of materials from an Xyz you control to destroy an equal number of cards on your opponent's field. Since we have the means to infinitely reattach our Spriggans to our Xyz, it means that Barrage Blast can be used almost every turn to destroy multiple cards. This in turn provides us another layer of removal akin to our Captain Sargus, that we can use on both players' turns to clear fields and go in for damage. Finally, from there we have the generic traps consisting of 3 Torrential for field wiping as well as 3 Imperm for further effect negation. Because our Spriggan's Exceeds flicker themselves out of the field, Torrential often is a one-sided field wipe. But even in those situations where we can't, Torrential still removes our Exceeds from the field by a card effect, meaning that it can also be used to proc cards like Golgonda and Interlude in desperate situations. And lastly, wrapping up the deck profile with the remainder of our X deck, we have 2 Divine Arsenal AA Zeus to start. Because our Spriggans can reattach themselves to our Exceeds, it's very easy to produce a 2-4 material Zeus off of any Spriggan's Exceeds for double disruption. Then we have 1 Abyss Dweller for Graveyard Disruption, 1 Tornado Dragon for Spell and Trap Hate, and 1 Castell for removal. Going into links, we only have 1 link in the 1 Bujinki Asahina for producing an Exceeds play when we have any other Exceeds play. Lastly, for the fusions, we have 3 Sprint and 1 Albion, all targets for being sent by Merrymaker or Brandon in High Spirits. Now it's at this point that we once again reach the combo component of our deck profile. Now, regardless of what has changed about the Spriggans, one thing that has not changed is how the deck plays. The deck is still very simplistic in its game plan. For a majority of your game, you will be making use of your Exceeds on your turn to deal chip damage, and then blinking them away on your opponent's turn so that they can't be dealt with. But the introduction of Merrymaker has made it such that this strategy now progresses somewhere over the turns, and the inclusion of cards like Kit and Regulus allows the deck to do a little more turn 1. As such, I'll be doing a single test hand today. What's going to happen is that I'm going to draw my hand of 5 and then try to build the most stable board possible with those cards. I'll then go into what this board can do in the following turn before analyzing its overall impact long term. Anyway, I believe that the deck is shuffled, the field is ready, so let us begin. Going into our one and only test hand, the hand that we're going to be working with today is going to consist of 1 Captain Sargus, oh you never want to see that, 1 Spriggan's Kit, 1 Effect Veiler, 1 Therion King Regulus, and 1 Spriggan's Rocky. Alright, I'm going to be honest with you, this hand is not very great. As I've already mentioned before, not opening the field spell and a bunch of Spriggans is functionally a lot of bricks in your hand. And the fact that we've opened out of all of them a Captain Sargus means that this hand is extra bricky. However, we still have plays that we can do, and this is a great time to exemplify the 1-card Exceeds play that Spriggan's Kit can achieve for us. What's going to happen is I'm going to start by normal summoning out the Spriggan's Kit and using Spriggan's Kit's effect to search for a branded spell or trap, of which I will grab a branded in High Spirits. Then, resolving Kit's effect, I'll then take that Captain Sargus and put it back in the deck where it belongs. From there, I'm going to activate that brand in High Spirits, revealing the Spriggan's Rocky in my hand to then send from my X deck to the graveyard a Spring the Iron Dash Dragon. From there, I'll then resolve Brandon High Spirit's second mode, sending this Rocky to the graveyard to then add a second Spriggan's Kit from my deck to the hand. Now from there, since I control the Sprint in the graveyard now, I can then use the Kit in my hand's effect to then special summon herself to the field, before then overlaying both of my Kits to then make my Spriggan's Merrymaker. Now that Merrymaker is summoned from the X deck, I can then use Merrymaker's effect to then send another Spriggan's monster from my deck to the graveyard, of which I'll send a Branga. Now, in this situation, I could be tempted to use the Branga's effect, banishing it and the Rocky to search for a card, but I really don't think I need to do that right now, since it really doesn't get me anything substantial. Instead, I'm going to activate this Branga's effect and then attach it to my Merrymaker before activating Regulus's effect to special summon itself to the field by targeting and equipping my Rocky from my graveyard. Proceeding to the end phase, I will then activate the effect of the Sprint in my graveyard to then summon out a Spriggan's monster from my deck, of which I'll then summon out a Sargus to the field that I shuffled back, before then passing turn to my opponent. Going into our opponent's turn, let's do a quick head count first. In our hand, we have a Veiler that we can send to the graveyard to negate any monster effect. Likewise, in response to any activation of an effect, we can also send the Regulus as well to negate another effect. Because we have the Captain Sargus on field, we can also detach a material from our Merrymaker to destroy another card if necessary. But even without all these things, Merrymaker still has 2 materials, meaning that when it banishes itself for its own effect, since it had 2 materials, it could then also proceed to send a Sprint from your X deck to the graveyard for an end phase setup. Going into your opponent's end phase, the Merrymaker will return and then Sprint will trigger again, this time allowing me to summon from my deck a Rocky. Rocky on summon will then be able to trigger its own effect to then add from my graveyard a Spriggan's Kit back to my hand. Likewise, since a Spriggan was sent to the graveyard, I can then also activate the effect of the Branded High Spirit to add it back to my hand as well. Of which, going into my opponent's turn, I can draw a card, special summon the kit to then search for a Branded Retribution, putting back the dead Branded High Spirits, or for then overlaying these two into any Xyz of my choice to out my opponent's board. Likewise, I still have a Spriggan now in my graveyard that I can banish alongside any of my Spriggans to search for a following play, giving me much extension on the coming turn. And that's going to do it for our Spriggans deck profile. So what are my final thoughts? Well, as much as I want to say that this deck is finally on par with the other Albaz archetypes, I still think the deck is lacking in certain departments. For one, the Xyz monsters, while decent, still lack a disruptive front that can allow the deck to play without other cards set up. Likewise, being a deck reliant on a field spell, the deck still suffers from bricking when we don't find a way into that field spell. But giving credit where credit is due, the deck does feel a lot more consistent than before. Merrymaker is a wonderful addition to the deck in terms of continuous setup, and the inclusion of Kit into Branded High Spirits really helps the deck get into full setups faster. And hopefully, with further future support, the deck can finally reach the point where it too can be a meta threat. But I digress. This has been Tony, your deck architect, with an updated Spriggan's deck profile. I hope you enjoyed, and I will see you guys next time.